Hi, my name is Jonae Shepherd. It's April the 9th, 2012, and I'm interviewing Dr. Betty Kasper, the Garden Library. How are you today, Miss Kasper?
I'm just fine.
My first question is, how did you end up coming to WIU?
Well, I had a job offer here. I was in Michigan.
Okay.
And I was dean of a private school in Michigan, Albion College.
Okay. All right. And what position did you get here?
I was a professor in the Department of Educational Foundations.
Okay.
Professor of Educational Psychology and Research Methodology.
All right. And is there anything particular that made you leave Michigan?
Well, they did away with my job as dean, and they wanted a vice president instead, but they told me that women could not have the job.
Oh, wow.
That only a man. In fact, the president asked me to find a man to take my job the job as vice president, who had all of my qualifications.
Oh, wow. So how was that experience?
So I said, well, why can't I apply for it? He said, oh, no, you're a woman. You can't apply. And so I resigned.
Oh, wow. And when you came to WIU in 1965, how were relations at the university between faculty and men and women and just on the campus?
There was no problem except that women were not promoted and very few were hired, especially in the so-called male fields. There were no women in the College of Business other than in secretarial science, which of course was acceptable. And the women were nearly all assistant professors or instructors. They didn't get promoted beyond that point.
Interesting. And
nobody discussed it until, we had a committee appointed.
Okay, and I read in the Couriers from years back about the forming of the committee at U of I. How did that come about?
Well, President Bernhardt, who was a very far-sighted president, I don't think he has gotten enough credit for all that he did for this university. In fact, nothing is named here for John Bernhardt. But he called me into his office, and I had no idea why. I had served on committees and knew him there, but he called me in and said, I want to appoint you chair of a committee of men and women faculty to investigate faculty ranks, salaries, promotion, and student problems, student funding by the student government for men's and women's groups. And he said, you'll have a broad support from me. And he said, I also want you to start the first women's studies course here. And I said, well, I'm a psychologist. I don't know anything about women's studies. And he said, well, not many people do, because it was I forget what the year was, but it was quite early. And there were hardly any women's studies courses around the country, and there were no women's studies majors at that time. So he said, I'm sending you off for training. I said, okay. So he sent me to Milwaukee, to Alverno College, a Catholic women's college, where the nuns were very with it and very much feminists. And I got some excellent training there and came home then to Macomb and started the first women's studies course, which I continued to teach until I retired. And I also chaired the other committee for, 7 or 8 years.
Okay. What factors, how did you come to file a complaint against WIU?
I never filed a complaint against WIU.
Oh, for the sex discrimination against women?
No, that is a false statement. And in fact, I threatened to sue the university because somebody put it down, and I called them up and said, I was chair of this committee. It would have been extremely unethical for me to turn around and sue the university when I was chair of the committee investigating salaries and rank. And I said, I never did that. And they said, oh, well, it's in Dr. Hollis's book. So I opened up Dr. Hollis's book. It wasn't in there at all. It said that the PE professors sued the university, but it did not say that I sued them. And they're supposed to have removed that, but apparently they haven't in all places because it's totally untrue.
That's interesting. What were some of the big policy changes that really helped lead to women on campus getting better pay and better, more equal rights as men?
Well, there were many. For one thing, student government funded men's and women's local sports, not the football and basketball teams, but the other sports. And they gave very little money to the women. And so we held hearings. The president had us hold hearings, both for faculty and for students. And so we called in the president of student government, and he said, well, women students didn't need any money. Said they could just play local teams from Monmouth and Knox and so forth. And I pointed out that that very same year, our football team was flying to Hawaii to play the University of Hawaii. And he said, oh, well, that's different. They're men. And at the same time, we learned that there were not enough uniforms for the women's basketball team. That when the junior varsity played, they had to then run in and throw their uniforms into the washer, and they had to wait till they were done before the varsity could play.
Oh, wow.
Because the university didn't buy enough uniforms. We also found out that the men's tennis team had everything furnished. They even had socks furnished. Socks, shoes, balls, rackets. The women had to furnish everything of their own to play on those teams. It was very unfair.
Wow.
And it took an order of the president to change it because the student government did not want to change it. They were very sexist at that time. As I say, the president thought it was perfectly proper that the football team would play in Hawaii, but he kept saying the women shouldn't play outside of the state. They can just travel locally and play. And also, the other thing they did, they gave less money to women members of teams for meals than they did for men, because
wow.
women don't need to eat as much, right? So the men got so much per meal when they were on a trip with the team, and the women got much less.
Wow.
And then the faculty situation was pretty bad, too. When we started to investigate faculty ranks, are you familiar with all the ranks?
Mm-hmm.
From instructor out to full professor.
Mm-hmm.
The year there were almost 130 professors on campus. And of that group, when we started to investigate, only 5 women were full professors.
Wow.
And not only that, they were all retiring. They were given that as a going-away present. You know, you're retiring this year, so we'll finally, after 30, 40 years, make you a full professor. And they didn't get it. And so we had hearings, again with the president's blessing, because a lot of the faculty did not want to come. And the president said, you will come. And so they would come and say, well, we don't have any women in our department because there just aren't any getting doctorates. We can't find them. We try to hire them. But we had done our homework. Mm-hmm. And so we would pull out the paper and say, well, we happen to have looked into this, and last year there were X number, maybe 50, 60, 70 women who got their PhDs in your field. Right. So there were women available. Mm-hmm. They just didn't bother, or they turned them down. Then the other thing they did, we had a revolving door policy that the woman would be hired as assistant professor, and she with her PhD, and she would have 6 years to make tenure, or she had to leave, and they didn't give them tenure. So we had this constant turnover of assistant professor women. They would stay, and then after 6 years they would have to leave, and this we were concerned about that, and the president said that has to cease, that these women have to get fair treatment. But they always found excuses, and we looked into it. They would say, well, this woman is not published enough to be promoted. But we would find men in the department who were promoted who didn't publish as much as that particular woman that they refused to promote.
That's interesting. And I even when I looked in some of the archives, I found some with the salary discrepancies and all of the...
Oh, they were tremendous, yes. And you see, back then, salaries weren't published. Nobody knew what other people were making until our appointment. The president gave us a computer printout of everybody's salary, and when we looked at it, we were horrified. Women with PhDs and 20 years experience were making maybe half of what their male colleagues were making with the same experience and the same degree.
Wow.
But you see, it was really arbitrary back then. The department chair could decide to give the money to whomever he pleased, distribute the way he wanted to.
So back then, were there many women chairs, or?
There was one woman chair when I came of the art department, Dr. Polly Pottle, and she was paid much less than any other man chair on campus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. And
I doubt that she knew it.
Oh.
Because there was no way to find out till President Bernhard had this committee appointed and to investigate.
Now, what you said that there a lot of the faculty didn't want to participate in these hearings and stuff like that. So was there a lot of backlash within the community from that?
No, it's just the president ordered them to, and they knew they better.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they probably groused a lot, but they didn't grouse to me. I mean, I'm sure they groused to each other, and but their excuses just didn't hold up as to why they weren't hiring or promoting women in their departments. And this was true of many departments, not just 2 or 3, but many of them.
Oh, wow.
Most of them, I would say, in fact.
Okay. Were you a part of the Women's Equity League here at WIU?
Do you mean WOW? Or
no, Women's Equity League.
That I don't know.
Okay.
That group.
Were you a part of WOW?
Well, what happened was this. We felt we needed the committee on the status of women. We felt we needed more support. And we thought, well, if there's no women's organization on campus, if we would found one and get it started, then they would support us and our work for salaries. Because the women were scared to speak up. They were scared of being fired. But, there's safety in numbers. And so we decided to found WOW. And so I remember the day very vividly that we went to Sallee Hall. And we invited all of the women faculty on campus to come. And then we told them what we wanted to do, and they presented nominations and elected their first president. And then we said, okay, you're going to be an independent group. The Status of Women's Committee is not going to be part of you in any way, but we would appreciate your support. And so then for some years they did quite a bit to support us. And then there came some years when they didn't support us at all. It became a social group.
Oh. Okay. And I know.
Because we were not very popular as members of that committee.
Okay. And when did the committee cease?
Oh, gee, I don't have the exact date. You probably could find it in the archives.
Okay.
But it lasted longer than President Bernhard's tenure. Now, the succeeding presidents were not as supportive, but I think they were afraid to disband it because they knew that women would rise up. But it lasted for at least one more presidency, and I'm not sure how much longer. Okay. Then when I ceased to be chair, then Dr. Beth Stifler, who was chair of the English department, became chair.
Interesting. Your inaugural lecture was just a few weeks ago. How does it feel to have a lecture series?
Well, I did it on purpose because I felt like, instead of just donating money to the university for a scholarship that would affect one person a year maybe, I thought it was more important during Women's History Month to do something to promote the study of science and math among all women. And that's why I particularly wanted an astronaut, because I thought that she would be quite popular as a drawing card rather than just have some scientist come. And I also wanted to take her out in the schools, which we did the next day. And she just absolutely enthralled the junior high students. And, of course, a lot of them asked questions about going into science and math as careers, because women students are not going into science and math. You know, they're still majoring in what we call the feminine subjects. And the feminine subjects pay less, get promoted less, but the more important aspect is that the United States is falling far behind in scientific research and mathematical research, because none of our students, male or female, is going into these majors anymore. It's terrible. The day she came, we had lunch with the chair of the physics committee, and I asked him, I said, of all your graduate students in physics, how many are Americans? And he said, we have 21 master's candidates in physics. Can you guess how many were American?
1,
2.
Oh,
You almost got it. You're close. But that's tragic. That's awful. Because, you know, what's going to happen to our future? The future is scientific research. And there are 12 countries now, even little bitty countries, that have space programs, and here we're dismantling ours.
Yes.
Even Nigeria has a space program. Korea, India has space programs. China has a big one. They're now building their own Cape Canaveral. And here we're doing nothing. And the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is this, that, okay, you say, well, what does space have to do with me? I'm never going to go up in space. You know, that doesn't really concern me. But there's all kinds of research that goes on in conjunction with space, of all that they need in space. And there are simply dozens of inventions that we use that are a result of space research. Components for your iPhone. Microwave oven we wouldn't have without that research. Tempur-Pedic, you know, that special foam for mattresses. And probably the most mundane one, but one that you and I use and everybody uses, Velcro. No, and there are dozens of items like this that we would not have in our daily lives were it not for the space research that we're now getting rid of. We have let go thousands of people who were doing that research and helping send astronauts up. And you probably know, but now if an astronaut goes up, they have to go to Russia and go up in the Russian ship with the Russians.
Yeah.
We're not being farsighted. We're not looking ahead to our future and saying we must plan for this. And particularly women. You know, 2 weeks ago I was part of an organization that gave awards to the outstanding seniors in each of the high schools in the county. And all of them were girls who had the best grades and all kinds of things. And so I asked them what they were going to do. They were seniors getting ready to go to college. One said she wanted to be an interior designer. Okay, now that's nice. You know, we need interior designers. But how is this going to help our future? None of them said they were going to major in any of the harder subjects. You know, it was all the simpler things like, well, of course, interior design is not even something you take in college.
Yeah, that's true.
It's sad. I mean, these people are setting their sights so low when we need them to set them high. So that's why I brought the astronaut here, to hopefully encourage more people, and especially female people, to go into science and math. We call those the STEM subjects now. Science, technology, engineering, math.
Oh, okay. I had another question. How was it growing up in Louisville?
Oh, well, I didn't grow up in Louisville, really. I grew up in the Bluegrass in a little town called Shelbyville. And the way you might have heard Shelbyville is you might have heard of my neighbor, because he made Shelbyville famous, Colonel Sanders. He lived across the road from me.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, he'd everywhere on his advertisements it said Shelbyville. And so I grew up in that little town, and then I went to high school in Louisville, and then I left and went to college here in Illinois. at Northwestern.
Okay, and you said your degree's in psychology?
Well, I have all kinds of degrees. My first degree was in education at Northwestern, and then I went for a master's in counseling at Michigan State. And then I went for my doctorate at Indiana University, and that was in educational psychology and student personnel.
Oh, okay. CSP.
But I'm still a Kentuckian at heart.
And I know you created the first women's studies course. What were some of the struggles in that?
Well, there was a lot of static. That when we had to go before a curriculum committee of faculty to get the course approved. So 2 of us went before the committee, and they didn't want to approve it. They were rather snarky, to put it mildly. And one of them, I remember very vividly, said, "We don't need this. This is nonsense. Women are discussed in every course. They're a part of every course. We don't need this." I happened to have with me on purpose my psychology book because I was teaching child psychology or human growth and development, whatever you want to call it. So I said, well, wait a minute. Let me show you this. So I opened my book. And I said, now here are 3 pages on the identification process. And I read some sentences that males do this, and males this, and males bond with their fathers, and males and males and males. And then I read the last sentence, and it said, little is known about females because no research has been done in this area. So that got us the course.
That's funny.
Now, of course, that's changed now. But back then, they only studied males. And if you ask professors in psych and behavior at all why they only studied males, they said, well, they're convenient, easy to get, and easy to get to volunteer, which is sort of nonsense because women would volunteer too. But it's the old boys club.
And, well, now it's 2012. So from when you came here in 1965 to now, what do you think? Do you think things have really changed since then for women on this campus?
Yes, they've changed considerably, but there's always room for more change. I mean, we have a whole women's studies department now with several faculty, an outstanding chair, Dr. Amy Schaus, and we have the Women's Center, which is very beautiful and does a lot and has a lot of outreach programs with Janine Kavakia. And so, those are all great improvements. I don't think we have had great strides made by the women students. As I say, they're still not majoring in the hard subjects. They take the easy stuff or the feminine subjects. A lot of English majors. Now, there's nothing wrong with English, but that's typically been a woman's area. And other areas like that. And it's very hard to get jobs in those areas, by the way. The big jobs that are wanting right now are in science and math and engineering. And also the big pay.
Yeah.
My alma mater, Northwestern, recently built a building about 3 years ago just for nanotechnology research. Are you familiar with nanotechnology? Mm-hmm. And it has dorm rooms and laboratories together in the same building for convenience for the students. And so they advertised internationally that they wanted students who had a background in the sciences, in several of the sciences and math, because that's what it takes in nanotechnology, because it's a combination of pretty much everything, And do you know how many students they could find the first year who were qualified?
25.
5. Just 5.
Wow.
As I say, we're ignoring the sciences because when I ask students why you don't take science, well, it's hard. I have to study too much. The courses are difficult. They're not, that bad. But we get foreign students here. International students are everywhere. Like, as I said, 19 of the master's candidates are from other countries in physics. And they know that this is the future. And they're willing to study hard to get those degrees. What is your major, by the way?
Journalism and professional writing.
Okay, well, that's acceptable. I hope you go in and become a good journalist. One of my college roommates won a Pulitzer Prize in journalism.
Wow.
Working
That's
for the
incredible.
Chicago Sun-Times. So, you can set your sights.
My sights are way higher than that.
Then a Pulitzer Prize? What do you want to do?
I want to win a few of those, maybe a Nobel Peace Prize, something huge.
Well, a Pulitzer Prize is pretty huge. There are very few of those, and theirs particularly for journalism.
Yeah.
I knew Martin Luther King. I hosted him when he came to Michigan.
Wow.
For 4 days he was there, and I got to know him quite well. And I took him around to all of his speeches and took him to meals and so forth, and felt very privileged to get to know him.
Interesting. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about?
I think I've pretty well covered the gamut, unless you have something else. And as I say, I am really putting in the plug for more people, and especially women, to go into science and math, because there's a new book out by Dr. Tyson DeGrassi, who's head of the Hayden Planetarium, which is the world's outstanding planetarium in New York City. Are you familiar with him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's one of our very fine black scientists. He has a new book out, Space Chronicles. And if you read that, it scares you to death. He says that not only do we not have our students going into science, so we don't have anybody to hire of Americans, that we have to beg the international students to come back. But he said, in the next generation, we're not going to have any professors to teach the science, because our students are not going on. And he said the big change in the last 5 to 8 years is that the international students who used to come here and get their degrees and then want to stay and work in American research, now they're going back home. And China is saying, come home. India is saying, come home. All these countries are saying, come home. We will pay you well. And so we're losing scientists right and left.
So do you think that it's the university's responsibility to say, this is what we need to do, this is the future, this is what you should take, instead of...
I don't think students will listen to that. I think we've got to start back in elementary school about the importance of science, and junior high. That's why I wanted to bring that astronaut, Dr. Godwin, to the junior high, because students have got to realize that science is interesting, that science can be fun, that it can be exciting, and yes, you do have to study, but it's worth it. And that's when they make up their minds, in high school and junior high, before they ever get to college.
Interesting. Well, thank you.
Did you ever consider going into science?
Yes, actually.